Hello and welcome back. This is Jennifer McGuire. So a few weeks ago, I shared a video showing several different designs that you could do with thin frame dies. Thin frame dies are very popular right now, and a lot of people said that they liked that video and wanted more ideas. So I'm back today to share 10 more techniques that you can do with thin frame dies. Now I have even more card examples than that, so I have a lot to share with you today, so it's a longer video. But I'm hoping that this inspires you to get more from the products you have. If you missed my first thin frame die video, I'll link to it up here on the top right and in the description below so you can check that out also. Well, Honeybee Stamps, who made the thin frame dies that I featured last time, have come out with some new ones, and I'm going to use those today. But keep in mind, these can be done with any thin frame dies that you may have. If you have concentric stacking dies, so say it's a circle die set with lots of circle dies, you can tape them together to get a similar effect. But I find these are really easy to use, and you can make impressions with them, create single frames, or create cool backgrounds to do lots of techniques with, which is what I'll do again today. So here are the different new ones from Honeybee Stamps. Be sure to check out the previous video for the older shapes. Today I'll be using the oval, the diamond, this hexagon, which is really fun to play with. So you'll see a lot of examples using that. There's also the triangle and then the slimline frames. Slimline cards are becoming more popular. They're long and narrow cards, and these are perfectly sized to create frames for that. So keep in mind, these dies can be used to make single frames, but I'm creating really cool kind of concentric backgrounds from them for today's video, and we'll start with how to do that. In my last video, I showed you one way to do that. Today, I'm going to show you kind of a new and improved way because I created so many of these that I wanted to show you the fastest way that I discovered to do them. So I start by going through my cardstocks and my scraps and finding the papers I want to use. I then cut them down to be just a little bit bigger than my die, and then I run it through my die cut machine. So I'm going to start with this diamond die and show you how to create a concentric background using these thin frames. So after I have run the die through my machine with a particular color of cardstock, I keep all the thin frame dies together. So you can see here I kind of pull the die off so all the die cuts stay together. Then I put a piece of tape on it. Any low-tack tape would work, just to hold the frames together so I don't end up with a mess of all of these frames getting tangled. So I'm just temporarily holding them together, which is a huge time saver. Sometimes I put the tape on top of the die cut, sometimes on the back. It doesn't matter. You're just holding them together. I continue to do this with as many pieces of cardstocks as there are frames on a particular die. So this diamond die creates 11 frames. You can count, there's 11 there. So I chose 11 pieces of cardstock and I die cut it 11 times. And now on the tape, I'm numbering them in the order I want them to be when I glue them down. So I kind of got a rainbow order going here of these soft colors. And you can see there are 11 different ones. Numbering it just makes it easier for me. Okay, next I have some thin printer paper. So this is just like typing paper, thin. The thinner the better, because you don't really want to add bulk to the pieces you're creating because we're going to die cut them later. So I'm numbering these each 1 through 11. I have as many pieces of this thin paper as I do different colors of die cut cardstock. So you can see I went from 1 to 11. I actually went from 11 down to 1. So that 1 would be on the top of my pile here. So this is the process I now go through to create these concentric backgrounds. Stick with me because it's really cool how easy and organized it is. So I start on the first piece of paper with my first color. I put a dot of liquid adhesive in the center, and I start with my center piece, and I set that aside. And that was the first color, as you can see there. Now I'm going to color number 2, and I'm taking the center out of that, the little piece in the center, and put it on sheet number 2. Now I go back to sheet number 1 and add the next one around that. So I'm going to start building up, and I'll end up with 11 sheets with these concentric diamonds, and they get bigger each time. So let me keep going so I can show you more. So here's number 3, and I'm on sheet number 3. I put the littlest piece on sheet number 3 here, just with a little bit of liquid adhesive. Then I go back to sheet 2. I put some liquid adhesive around that. And then I add this next size of diamond onto that. Then I go to sheet 1 and I add the next size of diamond onto that. Liquid adhesive works really well for this. I didn't do that in my last video, but I find it is better because it holds it better. And when we die cut this up, we want it to all stay intact. Okay, so now I'm at 1. I'm going to go back to 3. Got that done. Now I'm to 4. So I'm on yellow. I'll start with the center here. Once I do the center of 4, I go back to 3. And I do the next one there. Then I'll go to 2. And then I go to 1. So I end up building bigger diamonds each time. And my first one's going to end up with the biggest diamond of all. You can see I've got many building up here. And you're just going to keep doing this. So now I'm going to flip back. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we're going to 5. I pick color number 5 and put the little diamond in the center. And I'll continue to do this, now going backwards to 1. Now it may seem a little complicated, but it really isn't. After you do it once, you'll see it's very fast. And it's a great way to keep your pieces organized and keep them going in rainbow order. You could totally just die cut a bunch of frames and mix and match them together. But this way I use every single frame and I end up with 11 concentric looking diamonds in the end. So I'll have 11 pieces to make for cards. So that to me is really exciting. So I'm using up every bit of this cardstock. Okay, so now I've gone through all 11. So watch, you can see my diamonds get smaller as I go backwards here. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then 11. So I'm on my last one here, and I want to show you what we do after we get to the last one. Now I'm going to go through here and put the next one going all the way down. So 11, now we're on 10, then 9, we're going to 8, and we're just going to continue to go back down all the way to 1. And the cool thing is 1 will be done then because all 11 frames are on there. You can see it's in the rainbow order that we assigned. So number 1 is done, so I can just take this one and set it aside and let it dry. You can put something heavy on it if you wanted to. So now we're going to shuffle these back into order. So I'm going to go so that number 11 is on top again. And now we're going to go all the way back to number 1. And remember number 1, all we took out was that little bit in the center. So on 11, I'm going to put the next size one, and then over there is 10. I'll put the next size one on that. Now here we have 9 and we have 8. So I'm going to finish off all the light pink on all of these. So I'll continue to go backwards here. So we'll go from 8 down all the way to 3 and 2, you see here. So notice I'm down to 2 frames. I'll put one on 3, and then the final pink frame goes on number 2, and now that is done with all 11 frames on it. So I can set number 2 aside. Now all we have to do is go back to 11, and we can start adding on the next color, which is color number 3, and I go and continue to do that. And I just build up all the diamonds, and check this out. I have 11 diamonds done, all the same colors of cardstock, but they're all a little bit different. So I ended up using every bit of cardstock we die cut, and I have all of these pieces to add to cards. So then I just go and I trim the excess off of the thin printer paper that we used. And now we can use all of these diamonds on cards. Now I did a load of these because I love to mass produce. I find it very therapeutic. We just lost my mother-in-law recently, and I look for things that are repetitive for me to do to kind of clear my head, and this was the perfect fit. So here are all the little diamonds I made using that die just as I showed you. Here are some more diamonds I did. I actually did 3 of each of these, so I ended up with 33 diamonds doing it this way. So I can create some fun patterns with these, die cut from them, just create a focal point on a card, anything I want. Now I like doing rainbows because I find they're hopeful, but you could do this in any color combination. You could do them all the same color if you wanted, it doesn't matter. Here are some of the Slimline pieces that I created. There were a bunch more. I just didn't finish them quite yet. And keep in mind, you can make some smaller than others by not adding all of the frames. You can change this up however you want. So I didn't quite finish all these, but I have more for later. Now with the oval thin frame die, Lila picked out the 4 unique colors here. These are all cardstocks from Hero Arts. And we started making these, and we decided to make some of the ovals smaller than others, so there's different sizes. And I didn't actually use any of these in today's video, but I wanted to show you the option. It would be cool to do in rainbow and then cut this in half, and then you would have 2 rainbows to put on a card. Okay, here we have the triangles. I really like how these turned out. I'll be using a few of these today, but you can create some really cool backgrounds with these shapes. So here's one that I thought would be fun, just to take a square card and arrange these in a square and then put a simple sentiment in the center. The nice thing is after you go through the process of putting these pieces together, then the rest of the card can be very simple. But today I'll show you some ways to step it up. Now here are the hexagons. These are the first ones I made, and you can see it cuts a bunch of thin frames. So I used a lot of different colors of cardstock, but only one small piece from each color. So you can go through your scraps and pick out colors you want, or you can try out some colors of cardstock that you haven't had a chance to try. So you can see I've got a lot of those. Okay, so now that I have a bunch of these colorful pieces ready to go, let's do some fun techniques using these on cards. Now in my last video I showed you lots of things you could do with them, but we're going to step it up today. So I have 10 different techniques showing things you can do with those concentric pieces that we just created. So my first idea is to create a pattern on your card using these pieces. I have a few examples for you, but my first one uses the diamond pieces and a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch top folding white note card. I'm drawing light pencil lines down the center, horizontal and vertically, which helps me to create the pattern and make sure it's centered. So I start by putting one in the center, and then I'm going to put others in the corners. The nice thing is when you put a piece like this in the corner and you have a lot hanging off, you can trim that excess off and use it somewhere else on the card or on a future piece. I do save every little bit that I cut off of these pieces because I can die cut small hearts from them or whatever and use them on a future card also. So here you can see how I'm trimming off the extra of these diamonds, and then I can use these pieces to add the diamonds to the top to continue the pattern. I like to use a strong adhesive for this, like the Gina K liquid adhesive, or you can use any kind of strong tape runner. I like the liquid because you can put it down and kind of wiggle it into the right position and then leave it there to dry. So there we have our card with a fun pattern in the background. Now I ended up deciding I wanted to trim that panel down. So I trimmed it down from a card into a panel to go on the front of another white card. I put black cardstock strips down the side of that and added a hello die cut to the center. You could add accents or do other things to this, but I wanted to keep it simple. Now the hello that you see there is from this Honeybee Hello Summer stamp set. One of the things I like about Honeybee is that their coordinating dies actually cut out the sentiments in many cases. So I stamped the Hello Summer, used a coordinating die to cut it out, and then I cut off the word summer so I would have hello alone. That's a great way to stretch your products. And by the way, Honeybee just released a bunch of summer and beach and tropical themed products. I encourage you to check them out. They are really fun. I used a few of them today. Okay, I have another example of creating a pattern on your card using these pieces that we created. In this case, I'm doing a Slimline card. Slimline cards are very popular right now. They're long and narrow. They can vary in size. I'm doing about 8 1/2 by 4 inches. And there are many ways you can arrange these diamonds on to the card, but this is the pattern I decided to go with today. So as always, I start by doing a center line vertically and horizontally. I find that really helps to make sure that my pattern is centered, but you could totally just glue it on randomly if you prefer. Now I thought about doing the diamonds like this, but then I decided to turn them on their side. But the good news is I have enough of these diamonds that I can try both. So once again, I'm using liquid adhesive and starting with my center one. I find that's always the best to do. And then I build from there. And notice once again, I'm gluing some of these hanging off so much that I can trim that piece off and use it somewhere else on the card. So you don't need as many diamonds or pieces as you would think to cover a card. You can use the other half to add to the other spots. Now, if you don't have thin frame dies like the ones I used to create these pieces, You could always create your own with concentric stacking or nesting dies. Nesting dies are sets that come with a bunch of the same shape and different sizes. You can again use those to create a similar look. Or you could just die cut, say, a square or a diamond, and maybe die cut it from some fun pattern papers and create a pattern like this to cover your background. So here you can see I'm using some of the littlest pieces, and check it out. Look at those 3 pieces we have left over on the side. I didn't plan it, but those are the leftover pieces, so I'm going to make a card with that also. So this is just a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch top folding white note card, and I'm going to glue these down lined up in the center. I absolutely love that shape, and it's really just the center piece from one of these diamonds, from the different diamonds that I had left over. Love using leftovers on additional cards. Okay, so I finished off both of these cards. Very simple designs. That's a nice thing. Once you get your pieces made and glued to the background, it's very simple from there. For the Slimline, I added it to a note card. This note card's about 4 by 8 1/2 inches. You can change that. Just make sure it fits into a Slimline envelope, which I will link to below. I have this Birch Press Thanks die set. I die cut the shadow die from white cardstock and the letters from black. I did 2 white die cuts, and then I did the letters in black twice and glued those all together so we have stacked dimension. I glued that right to the center of our card and then added a little die cut heart that I covered with some shimmer pen and with glossy accents for shine. The Blessed to Have You in My Life is from this Honeybee Friend stamp set. This set is great because you can mix and match the little words together to create different sentiments, like the ones that I used here. The cool thing about this card is our pattern background is the star of the show, so the rest of it's very simple. Now remember that other one that I had with the leftover pieces, I kept this very simple too. I just white heat embossed the sentiment to brighten your day on a piece of black cardstock and added that right to the center. This to brighten your day sentiment I use a lot in this video because I'm using bright colors on my cardstock and really bold patterns, so I felt like that sentiment was perfect with it. And that is from this Honeybee stamp set that's on the top there. It's called Because, and I also used the Thinking of You from this set a few times throughout this video. Honeybee has a lot of those with different words, and I find they're really useful. Okay, now let's step it up with our second technique, and this is to make an impression or dry emboss on our frame pieces. This is probably one of my favorite techniques from today, and it really takes that flat piece and gives it much more character, as you can see here with the hearts. For this card and a few others, I'll be using 2 cover plate dies from Honeybee Stamps. These are the Fluttering heart dies. On the left, we have the die that cuts the fluttering hearts, and on the right is the matching die that just does the piercings of hearts. You can use them together or separately, and I'll use both today. So first I'm just going to use the regular die. I have set up my die cut machine to do an impression with a die instead of cutting with it. Now you can do this with any machine, you just need to follow the instructions. I first put down my embossing mat, which is a flexible mat. Then I put down my frame piece, then the die face down, and then my embossing plate, and I run that through. This will cause the die to make an impression instead of cutting it. So this creates fun texture on that simple flat piece, really stepping it up and giving it a different look. And I love those hearts just covering that. Now let's do another example. This time I'm going to use the pierced die. This just does the pierced hearts. So I'm going to run this through like a regular die. It doesn't actually cut anything, it just does those heart pierced pattern. So I'm just running through like I do a normal die with my frame piece, and you'll see that it creates a pattern of pierced hearts. It's super cool. Now I could leave it as is. These types of dies are very popular now, by the way. But since I have the Fluttering Hearts die that lines up with that, I'm going to line it up with the pierced hearts. You can look through the hearts to line it up. And now I'm going to make an impression on there. So this will have the pierced hearts, and then around that, the impression of the hearts. So you can really step things up with these layered die sets like this one. So I'll run this through as I normally would to make an impression with the die. And now you can see up close here, we have the pierced hearts inside of the impressed hearts. Such a cool way to add interest to any background, including these frame piece backgrounds. Great way to step it up and add more. Okay, so now with these pieces, I created a couple cards. This one is the one with just the impression of the hearts. I added it to a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch white top folding note card, did it off to the side and corner. And then once again, I used the to brighten my day sentiment right across the center. I felt with that texture and all the color, I could keep it very simple. Okay, here is the piece that we did the piercing of the hearts and then also the impression of the hearts. I added that to the center of a card, and then I put hugs using the Honeybee Bold Lowercase die set. I'll use it again later in this video. I die cut hugs 3 times, glued them together for a stacked look, and then added to brighten your day right across the top. By keeping the sentiment very simple, the focus can be on all the fun heart texture that we added to our frame piece. Okay, now it's time for our third technique to add some interest to our frame pieces that we've created, and that is to add layers. And I have a few different examples for you. For this one, I'm using the Honeybee Stamps Flower Petal Cover dies. These are similar to the Fluttering Hearts dies, which I just showed you. But in this case, the one on the left does the piercing in a flower shape and cuts the center of the flowers. And the one on the right cuts the outline of the flowers. So you can use these together or separately, which you'll see in this video. Here I'm using the pierced flower die on one of the frame pieces that we created. So I'm just running this through like I would with a regular die. It will cut the center openings of the flowers and then pierce the flower shapes. So now I have this ready. Now on top of that, I wanted to have the outline of the flowers in white. So I have white cardstock and then the other flower die. Run this through and this will cut the flowers out. Now I'm going to lay this on top of our colorful piece, and it creates a fun textured layer piece that we can add to a very quick card. So I'm putting some adhesive on the back of the flower white die cut, and I'm going to line it up with the flower piercing that we have on our rainbow piece here. I'll press that down, and then we can pop out the centers of the flowers too on the colorful piece. I then used my trimmer to cut it down. I just kind of took a rectangle section out of the center. I could have kept it as a hexagon shape, but I just wanted to have a piece along the bottom of a small card. So I glued it along the bottom of a card, and I'm trimming off the excess on the side and a little bit off the top. So I have a little mini card here. I like doing small cards sometimes. I then once again used the to brighten your day and put it right along the top and added some iridescent pearls to the center of the flowers. Look at all that layering texture. You have the pierced flowers and the die cut overlay. A great way to give these frame pieces that we created a completely different look. I am a big fan of layering background dies, but they are an investment. So to be able to use them creatively like this is a great way to get more from your money. Okay, here's another layering example, very similar to the last one, but without the piercing. In this case, I arranged a few of the triangle pieces that we created earlier on the front of a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch white note card. This would be a great one designed to do with any leftover pieces just glued all together. After I trimmed off the excess, I have the Honeybee Candle Cover die cut. So this is a background die that creates this white piece that you see here. I'm covering the back with liquid adhesive and just laying it over the top. So you can see how this technique would be great for just using bits and pieces glued close together. So that's on the front of a white note card that's 4 1/4 by 5.5. And I added a layered Yippee die cut. I think that's a discontinued one from Honeybee Stamps, but I used white and black cardstock for that. And then I added the sentiment that says, "It's your day," right underneath it. The "It's your day" is from this Happy Birthday stamp set from Honeybee. Again, I mentioned that they have a lot of stamp sets that have a main word with different words you can build up with it, and this is just another. Okay, now on to the fourth idea for using these frame pieces, and this is simple. It's to die cut shapes from it. So inside of the shapes, you've got the fun, colorful pattern. Now you can do this with any shape die. I decided to use the Honeybee Tropical Bouquet die set. There are many dies in this set. Some of them can be layered together, but I loved this particular leaf. So I cut several leaves out of some of the hexagon pieces, and you can see how it cuts beautifully. And I have leftover there that I can use for more die cutting. Remember, keep even the smallest pieces because you can die cut small hearts or circles from it. Now for the background, I use the Garden Lattice layering dies from Honeybee. There's the base plate and then the top plate. You can use them together or separate. And I really like doing layered white on white backgrounds like this because when you have a simple card design like the one I'm about to do, this adds a lot of interest and texture to the background. You can also use inexpensive white cardstock for it. Okay, so I have my leaves there that I die cut from one of our frame hexagon pieces. And then I have the sentiment. This is from the Wish You Were Here stamp set. And as I mentioned, Honeybee has coordinating dies for many of their sentiments, so I was easily able to die cut it and place it anywhere I wanted on my textured card. Now I like those colorful die cuts so much that I made another card with them. This time I used the Honeybee Pineapple Lattice dies for a layered background. So you have the base and the top dies here. They can be used separately or together. I use them together on a white note card, so lots of white on white texture there. And then I added the die cuts along with the To Brighten Your Day sentiment white heat embossed on a black cardstock strip. So this is a very simple design and you could use any die cut shapes for those colorful pieces. Here's another idea for you along the same lines. There are many die sets that have come out lately that build an image, maybe a layered flower or leaves, in this case a heart with arms wrapped around it. Well, I thought it'd be fun to use one of these framed colorful pieces that we made as part of that layering piece. So I'm using the Honeybee Paper Hugs die set. There's a stamp set too. I've used this in a video before and I used it a lot off screen. Well, I used the heart from this to cut from the center of one of my hexagon frame pieces that we assembled. The nice thing is I can use the heart and then save that negative space piece for another card. So I also created little arms that I die cut from just regular cardstock, and I'm wrapping it around that colorful heart. Now in the past, I've done just a basic red heart behind the arms, but I thought it'd be fun to add this colorful pattern behind it, and I really think it makes the card speak more. So on the background of this card, I used the Fluttering Pierced Hearts die that I showed you earlier that creates a little pierced heart pattern. I did that on white cardstock and added it to a white note card. And then we have our heart assembled there in the center. And I white heat embossed Hugging You Now from that Paper Hugs stamp set. Here's a second card that I made because I really like this design. This time I put the sentiment on the heart and the arms above and below it. And I used both of the Fluttering Heart layering dies on the background, both the one that cut the hearts layered on top of the pierced hearts. So you can see how you can get two different looks from that die set. Okay, now I thought it'd be fun to also make it look like hands were holding instead of hugging. So I did this design where I die cut from one of my Slimline frame pieces that I arranged. I die cut a heart from that. And then I did the two hands coming together and holding in the middle. You can see my layered Fluttering Hearts background and the Thinking of You from that Honeybee Because stamp set. And I think this was my favorite of the designs and I plan to make more. Okay, my fifth idea for using these framed colorful pieces is to line it up with an impression in the background. So here I have the diamond die and I have a note card that I've opened and I'm putting on my embossing mat in my die cut machine. Again, I'm using the embossing mat and embossing plate so that I make an impression with the die instead of cutting with the die. And these thin frame dies are great for making an impression. Check out the cool look you get on a background. So you could use that as a backdrop for anything. But what I decided to do was die cut a heart from one of my framed colorful pieces that we assembled. Now I can use that negative space on another card, but for this one, I just have the heart shape itself. And I die cut two white hearts to go behind it, just so it had some nice dimension. Remember, we have thin printer paper on the back of that heart, so it's kind of flimsy, so this makes it stronger. I then glued it in the center of our card, lining up the diamond pattern on the heart with the diamond pattern impressed in the background. And it really pulls this simple card together nicely. You could, instead of doing an impression on the background, just do white diamonds die cut and glued onto the card and line that up with the diamonds in the heart Totally up to you, but I thought this was a great way to add some simple texture and pull the whole card together. That Hugs is from a die set from Honeybee Stamps. It has Hugs, Hello, Happy, and Thanks. I'll use Thanks later in this video. I really like the detail, intricate style of that you can put on any card. The die set also includes that large frame that's perfect for slimline cards. Okay, now on to the sixth idea, and this is to use these frame color pieces as a backdrop for a simple stamped image. So there are many images out there that I like that are outline, and they're really meant for coloring, but I'm not great at coloring. It takes me a lot of time. So this is an idea to make it quick and use those images. So here I have the Honeybee Tropical Tweets set on the left and the Birds of Paradise on the right. And there are some funny sentiments on that set on the left. Well, I'm going to stamp the sentiment on my card. So I have a top folding white note card here, and I'll stamp it right on the bottom. But I also wanted to add a white die cut to the background. So this is how I did that to make it look like I stamped over it. Right on top of that stamping, I'm gluing down a die cut that I created with the Honeybee Palm Frond die, which is hard to say. So I glued it right on top of my sentiment. And now, with my card still in my stamping tool, I'm going to stamp it again. So now that stamping lines up with the stamping that was underneath, and we have our sentiment stretched across that texture. Now finishing this was really quick. I took one of the Slimline frame pieces that I created and I cut it in half and added it to the top of the card along with a cute little image left uncolored. You could color it if you want to, but I thought it was kind of fun leaving it black and white. So you can always use these frame pieces that you create as a colorful backdrop to a stamped image. Okay, my next idea, number 7, is to cut it up. So create one of these fun framed colorful pieces, but then cut it up to get different shapes and arrange them differently. So here's one example. I'm taking my hexagon and just cutting it up into triangles. So I'm just cutting from one side all the way to the other, and I'll do that, and I end up with all of these triangles that I could assemble in so many ways. So I ended up doing it like that, but you can also line these up in a little border on a card. You can rotate them so the pattern's a little bit different. The sky is the limit with these. But now we have triangles instead of the hexagon. So there's many ways you can arrange them, but I decided to stamp a sentiment at an angle and then leave a little gap between those triangles so that the sentiment would be the focal point of the card. Very easy to do, and I have lots of pieces left over that I could create the same design with. And think about it, with the other shape thin frame dies, you would get different shapes. Say you cut the diamond in half and then half again, you get different shaped triangles. You could cut the oval in half and you get 2 rainbows. So you can try this with any of the different shapes. Okay, let's move on to number 8. Our next idea is to create a peek-through window. And this is again one of my favorites of the techniques because I think it pulls it together nicely. So I have one of my hexagon assembled pieces here, and I'm die cutting right from the center a large heart. The nice thing is I have 2 pieces here I can use for 2 cards, so I'll save the negative space for later. Now I have a heart die that is slightly smaller, and I'm going to die cut that from the front of a white note card. So this is going to create a window. Again, this heart is a little bit smaller than the other. I just used a stacking die set for that. Now I'm going to glue that on the inside of the card so that when the card is closed, that colorful piece shows through, but when you open it up, it's a bigger heart there. Now I wanted to add something to the front, and I should have thought of it earlier, but I wanted this fluttering heart die cut on the front. This is what I did to fix that mistake of not doing it earlier. I held it to the front, flipped it over, and traced the window onto the back of that white heart die cut. I'm now taking the same heart die, lining it up with my pencil mark, running that through my die cut machine, and now the heart window is in the same place on this, so I can glue it right onto the front. I could have glued the die cut onto the note card before die cutting the heart window if I wanted to. Okay, I'm using the Birch Press Jumbo Hugs die to create a sentiment that stretches across the heart, which is really cool because it's kind of floating there. So I did the background of that with white cardstock and then the letters with black cardstock. Now for a little sentiment underneath that, I used a Simon Says Stamp sentiment strip. Now they have many of these that are pre-printed sentiments, and all you have to do is cut out the one you want. It saves a lot of time. I picked one of the longer ones so it would stretch across the heart, and I'm putting a little bit of strong adhesive on the 2 ends and then adding it right below the hugs. If you wanted to, you could add some embellishments to this, but I feel like it's got enough color and texture going on already. Notice there's plenty of room to write your personal sentiment underneath the heart on the inside. And again, I think this is one of the designs that's the most effective, so I'll be making more of these with my leftover pieces later. Okay, idea number 9 is to create 2-for-1 cards with die cutting. And I've shown a few examples of this along the way, but I wanted to call it out specifically. In this case, I die cut the word hello, and I use the negative space and the positive space on 2 different cards that are very different. So I have the Birch Press Jumbo Lingo Hello die set. I'm using the shadow hello to die cut from the center of one of our hexagon pieces. So I'm going to use the negative space first and glue it onto a white note card. I then use the hello letters itself. The die comes with the shadow and the letters. Die cut those from black and added it into the openings on that card. I like how the word hello stands out more because we have that white opening around it and the black letters right in the center. If you wanted to make it even more impactful, you could have used some dimensional adhesive to adhere our hexagon piece down, but I wanted to go for a smoother card. So I added a little sentiment strip underneath the word hello. This design works really well with any word die that comes with the shadow die. If you don't have that, you could instead just die cut whatever shape you want out of it and use that for a 2-for-1, but I do like that white shadow around it. Now let's use the other piece to create a second card. So here is the Rainbow Hello piece. I did back it with another white die cut, so it was a little stronger. And then I added the letters hello on top in white. I added that to a white note card along with that white flower die cut piece. I created that using the flower layered dies that I showed you earlier. This is the one that does the piercing and then cuts out the center. I thought it added a little interest to the background. And once again, I added a sentiment strip underneath it, and you can see that little pop of rainbow color coming out from behind those white letters. So these backgrounds are great for 2-for-1 cards. Okay, the last technique to share with you today is to create shaped cards using these frame pieces that we've created. And by the way, I do have bonus cards too, so stay tuned. But for a shaped card, I thought the hexagon would be perfect. So I have one of my hexagon colorful pieces, putting glue on the back of it, and then I'm gluing it to a piece of folded white cardstock. And I'm making sure one edge of the hexagon is lined up with that folded edge. I'll press that down, and then I'm just going to trim through that folded piece of cardstock and cut right up against the colorful frame edge. So notice that one side does have the fold, so this will open up like a card. So it's fun to do shaped cards, and this fits nicely into a 5.5 by 5.5 inch square envelope, or I believe you can put it in a 5 by 7 envelope. Now I kept this one pretty basic because there's so much color. I used the ink to paper long distance hug die. I've been wanting to use this. I die cut that from white cardstock and added it, along with a few white die cut hearts that I had saved in my stash. So think about how you could make circle cards, square cards, diamond cards, any shape, but this hexagon really is impactful. Okay, now I have a couple bonus cards before we go. In this case, I used the Slimline frames for a very simple card, but I added some individual letter die cuts, and I wanted to show you how I did that. I have a piece of purple tape that is sticky side up, and I'm putting tape at the ends to hold it there. So now I have my letters to spell Missing You that I die cut from the bold lowercase dies from Honeybee. I did die cut each letter 3 times from white cardstock and glued them together so they were stacked and dimensional. Now I lined up the Missing You on that tape using the grid line on my work surface to make sure they were straight. Now I'm putting another piece on top so that I can pick up all of those letters together. And by the way, you can reuse this purple tape. So now I have them all connected, and I can put adhesive on the back of them, pick them up and easily center them on my card, move it around till I'm happy, then lay them all down, press it there. Once it's dry, I can remove the adhesive and check it out. They're all positioned just wonderfully, and it took very little effort. So that's a trick if you like to use alphabet die sets like I do. And Slimline cards are fun because you can put longer sentiments like this on it. And you can use bigger letter dies that fill your card nicely. And I have one more random bonus card for you. I had the other half of this Slimline frame piece left over from the bird card I did earlier, and I just decided to add it to a white note card and add a thanks die cut. I mean, it couldn't be any more simple, but it's a colorful happy card that I think would make someone smile. So you don't have to be fancy with these designs. All right, there you have a bunch more ideas for using those thin frame dies that I keep seeing more of on the market. I know a lot of you were looking for more ideas, so I hope this was helpful. If you are interested in the products that I use today, I do link them all below in my YouTube description. You can also go to my blog for more information. And in the middle, as always, I have 2 more videos to share with you. One is that other thin frame die video, and then another that I think might be helpful for you that talks about stacking dies, which is very similar. And if you don't have thin frame dies, you can try that. Thanks for watching. Have a great day, and we'll see you soon.